All right. That's probably like. All right. Okay. So, hi everyone. My name is Jonell Logan. I am the creative director here at McColl Center for Arts and Innovation. And I am really excited for a couple of reasons. One, this is our first artist talk back in the building since the pandemic began. And so it's a really exciting moment to have a conversation and to be amongst artwork in the building. And then I'm also here with one of the artists in residence, Sharon Norwood. And so we're gonna have a really candid kind of conversation about her work and the process, and really I think some issues around identity and like the whole post-colonial impact on Black folks. But that's like a whole conversation. And so I'm really excited. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you. And this is gonna be candid. Like Sharon and I know each other. So we're going to be totally, I think, honest and transparent in the conversation. And we invite you to ask questions. So if you're on Facebook Live, we ask that you put your questions in the chat and we'll be sure to share them with Sharon. So I think the best place to begin is at the beginning. So if you could introduce yourself to everyone that is here with us and just like who you are, where you're from.
Okay, so again, my name is Sharon Norwood, and I am where I'm from. I was born in Jamaica, and I spent most of my young life there. I think I went to Canada when I was like 12 years old, and so I went to most of my high school and middle school was in Canada, and then I've been here in the U.S. For about, I think, 17 or 18 years now. Yeah. So yeah, I'm an interdisciplinary artist. And I've been here at McColl Center now since January. Well, the residency started in January, but really I've been here since February. Just making some new work and continuing on with my creative concepts and such. Did I answer your question? I hope I did.
Yeah, and so it's funny. Like one of the things that I wrote on Facebook when we were talking about this talk, is our conversations around tea.
Right.
And I think they're important. I didn't realize that they were important, but I kind of feel like they are because there's like this whole post-colonial thing and call it like colonialism wrapped in it a little bit. There's like, we started with electric kettle versus like on the stove kettle.
Right.
And yeah.
No, I do think, and I have been aware before. I think it wasn't until leaving that I became aware of a lot of cultural habits. And perhaps tea is one of them. In the Caribbean, tea is like a big part of culture. Whether it's bush tea, whether it's medicinal teas, whether it's in the morning before it's a very much a part of your custom. And so there's like, I know when I moved here, came to Charlotte, my apartment didn't have a kettle, and the whole thing about not having a plugged-in kettle versus a stove kettle is that I remember my mother, she would tell me to make her tea. I could never put it in the microwave oven. She would just it's a different, and I think it's a different heat. So for me, I guess the stove, the plugged-in reminds me of the perhaps the microwave hot water that kind of gets to what it 112, and it kind of 212, and it kind of gets like cold really quickly. So I'm kind of like obsessed about hearing that kettle whistle.
But I think that whistle is so much more because so much of your work is based in your in spaces of identity and cultural practice.
Yeah, and I think when I think about it, I talked about it yesterday, and I really, and ongoing obviously, that my work is definitely a way for me to unpack my situation in the world, my place in the world. I'm based on my history. I think, especially with me, even though culturally I'm folklore label, I feel on the forms, are you African American? I go, yes, because it's just so much easier. But I think, I'm a lot more nuanced than that. I'm not, yes, I am African per se, and I'm living in America, but, even you and I have a lot of similarities, but we're very different in terms of our cultural background and understanding of certain things. So I think in my work, I'm always kind of like trying to understand that, like, I recall the first time moving to Canada and thinking that everybody who was Black was like Jamaican, a Jamaican accent. And the first time I heard somebody with another accent, I think it might have been a Bayesian accent, and I was really like, what is that? What was happening? So I think that I'm still perhaps doing a lot of that, as I unpack my circumstance and my history and with the world and with things that I encounter. So I'm always unpacking. So sometimes, I think my stronger cultural associations come forward. Tea certainly, and I think it comes in bit by bit. It's not all deliberate. Sometimes it's there, like it comes in when I, don't even realize it's coming into the word. Yeah. Did I go off again?
No.
Train station?
No. So again, this is totally like a candid conversation. Go with me. Because we need to. Yeah. So for folks that are not necessarily familiar with how you define interdisciplinary artists, can you unpack that a little bit?
Okay. Well, for me, interdisciplinary, and that's something I struggle with because I know in undergrad, coming to art at a later stage, I was just like very interested in everything. Like, I saw possibilities in every medium, and got excited at every medium that I took. So it was really difficult for me to get centered in any one thing. Conceptually, my conceptual ideas is, I think, what allows me the freedom to sort of jump around different mediums. So through my conceptual ideas, I can make a video, or I can, make a painting or a drawing. Although I say to folks that I'm centered within ceramics and drawing, but I give myself permission to do other things. Like I think there's a piece behind us which is actually fiber, so that's not painting and it's not ceramic, but it still engages with the line for me, and the line is sort of the center of a lot of my conceptual ideas. So yeah, interdisciplinary in the sense that I utilize whatever medium that that I find most interesting at the time. Yeah.
But isn't this about interesting?
Why I say interesting because sometimes it is the work that dictates the medium, but sometimes it is it could be I don't want to pull out clay and get my hands and have to cover everything in plastic. So it is the medium that is most interesting at the time. But I think within those mediums, I mean, I definitely there's thought ahead of time as to why I'm utilizing these certain mediums. So yeah, I think it varies, but it's definitely like whatever I find most in the moment. Yeah.
So you mentioned the line. Can you talk about that?
The line. Okay. Yeah. Well, for me, I guess I can talk about it too. I can talk about the line of the democratic space. Or I can, the line of the democratic space, or the line is meaning that the line is something that nobody owns the line. You don't need permission to draw a line. You can pick up a pencil and draw a line. You can use your finger to draw. So for me, the line becomes this democratic space that anybody can engage in. And but it's political for me in the sense that it's not just a straight line. I'm making a difference between the straight line and the curly line. So for me, the curly line for me represents my body, myself. My hair is curly, and it's an identifiable marker. And it's something that I think that if you were to say arbitrarily, we're going to use a line to define black spaces and white spaces, I would see the curly line would be representative of the black space. So that's what I mean by it being democratic, this democratic thing that anybody can use. Surely anybody, whether you're black or white, can still use the line, So that's what I mean about it being a democratic space that you don't really, at least that's what I tell myself. The Democratic. Yeah, and then it's political in the sense that, yeah, it represents hair, represents black hair, and what does it mean when you take black hair and you put it on, in a museum? What does it mean when you take a black hair and you put it, and folks are paying fees to come inside a space to, look at black hair? Like, what does that mean? Like, so to me, that's like quite, so I guess it's agency, I suppose. It allows me a certain agency to be able to speak and assert myself as, a black person in the world.
And I heard you talk about like the idea of like shedding hair, right?
Right.
Which we all kind of worry about. Like, it's okay, but generally, like the thing that you leave behind.
Right. And it's a caring conversation. And again, that's why I think with the word, it's something that's empowering and keeps me kind of like inspired. In the sense that, as a person of color, I navigate different spaces. So, yeah, if I go to camp or, in a non-black space and I'm going to blow dry my hair after wash, I have to like really think about that. Like, I don't want to do that because, my hair is going to be little sculptures everywhere, that I'll have to collect. And then, so that makes me think about, what does it mean to not feel comfortable doing something so human, so natural in any space, And so that's what I talk about. So I think about, my hair in different spaces. And I guess that's where some of the work, in the work, like in some of the two-dimensional work, I'm able to like cover things with hair, and it's an aggressive move, and it's but that's the space it's coming from. It's coming from a space where I'm giving myself permission to put my body in these spaces, as opposed to cleaning up, taking it, removing it, or hiding it. So it's not becoming invisible. So it's a way of becoming visible.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's not your literal hair. Like you're not.
You mean on my thing?
Yeah.
No, it's metaphorical. Yeah, metaphor. Yeah. So the lines. I mean, yes and no, right? Because initially all of my work was based on still like drawings of my hair, where I looked at my hair and I made these marks. And so even though it's removed from actual hair, for me there's still this connection to hair. So I'm still putting this hair in this thing. So you can still, even though it's not hair, it is hair. You can still have this conversation.
Mm-hmm. And so they appear in two-dimensional form in drawing,
right,
and in prints,
right.
But then they also occupy three-dimensional space,
right. Yeah, they become like sculptures.
So like
this.
Small. Yeah.
Like this small.
She can do that. I can't. I know. I can't grab it like that.
Like this small thing here. Yeah. Yeah, they take up, and I think I began doing these sculptural installations right at the ending of grad school, and they're getting bigger. I think I'm getting a little bolder, a little bit more comfortable. Because at first I wasn't quite sure, what to make of them. I enjoyed them being this physical thing, and I like that they're extracted. Because I feel like if I came to the work with this, as opposed to the line, maybe it wouldn't read as well. So now I feel like, after a while working in that space, I feel like I can play a little bit now with the mark and with the line, and it's still red, even though it doesn't look anything. It's removed. It still reads as hair, which is still kind of part of the fun part of the work.
And so I have a couple questions. So I have a context of hair, right? So like when I saw your work, I was like, oh, here, right? But I think there are people who might not be familiar, like intimately familiar with like 4C hair.
Oh, and it's interesting you say that because I know that classification, of course, I'm not sure when it started, because that wasn't like, I've become aware of that classification through my work. Because before that, I wasn't aware of that. And I'm not sure if that language is part of the beef culture, because when you go to I don't know.
Girl, let it out.
My hair, that's how it's labeled, for A, for B, for C, So I don't know, so I'm thinking that's where it came out of that culture, because I don't necessarily classify the hair in terms of, curly A, curly B. For me, it's just, my hair, it's curly, that's what it is, right? And I think to myself, from my visual history of Black people, that the closer you are to Black people, the curlier, the more curly your hair takes on. So for me, I could generalize and say curly is Black. So I'm familiar with, and I've even heard where there's this differentiation between kinky and curly
and coily.
Yeah. And again, that's not necessarily my history. Maybe I separated from humans too soon and didn't learn that part of it. But that's not my history. Although I know in learning about my history, I've learned that in certain cultures there are a lot of, like in Jamaica, for instance. I think Claude McKay said that there was all these words that was described being Black. There was quadroon, octoroon. I mean, there's tons, right? And I think that in itself speaks to the level of importance that the community places on a thing. You place, and so here for me, when we start breaking it down to A, B, C, for me, it emphasizes the level of importance we place upon the thing. That we have to So I'm not sure how I feel about that. I mean, I've definitely been thinking about it, and it's more like education for me. And okay, I see that, but I'm not sure how interested I am right now in that kind of language, because it feels like it's almost for me, it feels like it's separating me more, or I don't know. That's kind of what I think off the top of my head.
But I think it's interesting because when we, going back to the beginning, when we talked about how we are similar, right? And I think it's a representation of Blackness in general, that while there are similarities amongst Black folks, there are all these different points of reference that people are coming to a thing with, right? And how to navigate that. And I've asked that question, I think, because, how, as people approach your work from different spaces,
right?
How do you navigate? Do you navigate that? I mean, do you care?
I totally do. I mean, I totally do. I remember initially when I had my drawing, when they were just very simple drawings, and I was showing them, I wasn't sure. I looked at it and I was like, wow, this stuff looks like hair to me, And my godson was in the room in my studio, and he's 7 years old. And he looks at me and says, "How do you get the hair on the wall?" And I was like, "Whoa, child, you see what I?" So then I started inviting my different friends from different nationalities to look at the work, because I wanted to see what their reaction, what they saw. And definitely, a lot of my Black friends saw, and they gave the work stories. They were like, "Oh, that's my hair when it's falling off, out of the brush," or "That's my." And so that was really empowering for me. And then my non-Black friends, my white friends, were saying, "Ooh, it's a little long." And so their reference was body, personal, downstairs in the basement hair, right? So it was very different from my experience, but that didn't really, that to me that didn't deter, or make the work less meaningful to me, because I think it's their story. I think what happens though is that definitely, I think in spite of that, whether you're Black or white, I feel like my audience sees it as Black hair, and even if they do, I think they see it as Black hair, is what I think. I mean, perhaps some people may see it as body hair, but I think for the vast majority of folks are seeing it as body, as Black, as a Black figure.
And what's cool about it, so there's this space where it's self-referential, but then it's not. It's about hair, but it's not. It's about the body, but then it's still about so much more.
Yeah, And I think for me, like, I remember in undergrad, like, making work and thinking about and wanting to make work that appealed to a broader audience. Like, I wanted to make work about myself, but I wanted it to have like a broader connection to others. You know? And so I feel like with the word, like, if you're a person of color, you definitely identify with work no matter where you are in the world. You know, it's like, it's your story, I think. And so that's one of the part of it.
So let's go so we talked about the line a little bit, and then how it appears in drawings and prints, also in vinyl, like on walls, like, you know. And then it appears in ceramics this way, but then also in your tea sets.
Right. Yeah, so I think initially, I mean, there's definitely different conversations I'm trying to have. Some of the material that I use is like porcelain, fine china, you know, objects embedded with its own history, you know, a specific narrative. And a lot of times when I think about race and race relation, I always think that a lot of things is hidden in plain sight. And so I think with the work, I try to bring some of that stuff like arrested somehow so people see it. And so, you know, with the porcelain pieces, you know, the thing about, you know, that we think about class and high society, and just these things that we kind of like consider like we lull ourselves into this romantic space with these objects without really sort of thinking about, you know, how they also strengthen other not so positive narratives, you know. Or so I think what I try to do with my work is I try to find a way to bring that so people can kind of like question the romance that they have for that visual type of language, so they can ask themselves why am I, you know, why is this such a nostalgic, wonderful thing when you really think about it, you know, there's all these other really, you know, horrible kind of things beneath the surface.
So how does that play out in the tea set?
Well, in the tea set, I think with the tea set, you know, when we think about tea, we think about high society. In fact, these tea sets, like, I remember shopping for these particular porcelain objects and learning that, you know, some of these things would have been given to a bride. You know, when you got married, you would have inherited these tea sets that you'd probably bring out, you know, during special occasions, you know, being very fancy ceremonies and such like that. And so when I start thinking about that, I think about, you know, Black people in those spaces, you know, serving, you know, and just being, you know, a part of that performance, but not really being a part of that performance. And so that's what, and especially too, when I think about, you know, when we look at all our romantic ideas about, you know, you hear people talking about, oh yeah, my grandparents, they gave me this beautiful thing, and they, you know, I've inherited all this stuff. But, you know, with that, there's a long history about wealth being passed and how it's passed on, and who gets wealth and who doesn't get wealth, and the have and the have not. That's also embedded in that story that just gets overlooked a lot. And so with the tea set, I think for me, it's like a way to talk about some of those types of things. You know, whether when you look at the tea set and it's, you know, you think about, you know, your romantic ideas of family and such, and that these special things were given to you, you know, for wedding present. But yet there's, you know, another set of society that, you know, doesn't get to share in that space. It doesn't get to like have those same what is it? I mean, it's interesting because I like to say that the work, I put a lot of stuff in the work because when I talk about certain things, it can be negated one way or the other. But then when it's in the work, you kind of forced to like think about it in a very sort of specific context. Mm-hmm. You know, in a way, I think maybe the work, I'm better at articulating my ideas through the work than I am actually talking, you know, like putting a finger on it with words.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, I just want to, we're going to keep talking, but you're invited to ask questions. There's a little blue box. But please, in the chat, if you have questions, go ahead and add them. I see there is a question. Yes, can you speak about your sense of scale? Yes, sense of scale. I'm reading from a distance and I don't have my glasses on, so just a disclaimer, like I can't see.
Can you speak about my sense of scale? In terms of me creating intimate objects and being small?
But I think, well, yeah, and I think there's a couple things about scale, because some of them are intimate, but then I think there might be a shift happening.
Yeah, I think initially when I started, I was very utilitarian type of objects that were like definitely very small, and you were picking it up. You're going close, looking, but it's like private. It's a moment between you and the object that creates this sort of like I think one of the things I said that you're seduced into this pretty form, and you get and you realize what you're looking at, and you kind of have to negotiate your way out. You know, so I kind of like that with the smaller work that I've been working on. Now that I've been working a while, I'm certainly thinking about scale in a different way and what does it mean. And I think that's always been in the back of my mind. I think my abilities, creative abilities, probably catching up to those ideas. But you know, the whole idea of being in a museum and having these things that very large scale and dwarfing the viewer. I mean, that's certainly very exciting. But yeah, I mean, I think scale definitely intersects the work and changes its meaning. And for now, I think right now in the combination with the work is this very intimate thing, but it's growing like there.
Well, so there's this thing though, and where did I see that? It might have been in the video or somewhere else. But the landscape, you were sharing while you were here, the landscape that you're working on.
Oh, the drawing, the big drawing that I did that's in Montreal right now, and the exhibition opened up today.
Yeah. That's funny. So now we're just pause for a moment and share that.
In Montreal, that's opening up today, the first, with Cecile Bratmore at the Center. I can't even say it. I have to be looking at it. The Lexbridge Center in Montreal. Wait, yay!
So
yeah, they're in another country. Yeah, so those ones were I think they were similar to this, where I'm just painting the gesture and the mark and thinking about the mark and maybe thinking about because when I was doing my drawing, I know one of the things I was very aware of is that you get into this very intuitive, meditative space. And so I think about mark making, and the marks are body made. And I tell my students that, when you become an artist, you have to make a lot of work, because eventually you will recognize the marks your body made. And so once you recognize that, then it's a lot easier for you to make work, because you can kind of like, you can plan for that. It's like you can be a lot more deliberate. And so for me, I think I was thinking about marks and gestures and stuff like that. And I think I'm sure I'm going off.
No,
I'm gonna follow it anyway. So I was thinking about marks and gestures. And so when I think about marks and gestures, and also like penmanship, that's another story. I think about the lines start to look very much like my handwriting. And so as I was looking at my handwriting, being an immigrant child, letter writing is like a big thing. So, my father used to write me letters like all the time. I didn't always write them back, but I was always getting letters. Letters were something that was a big part of my life growing up. And so my penmanship was always something that I was very aware of, in terms of writing and how it looks in script versus, or you guys call it cursive versus print, was always something that I was always aware of, because I had friends who had like amazing penmanships, and you practice to make sure you had those very specific the way so when I had a chance to translate the work, to me it was the same thing. It was a similar DNA. It was like, except it wasn't my hair DNA, it was my handwriting DNA that I could use to sort of interrogate the line, So again, a way for me to work cross-disciplinary with a simplest conceptual idea of mark making.
It's interesting though because like you can frame the conversation around line, right? Which is a very formal,
right,
practical mark making process
right.
with artists. But the content and the impetus for the work.
Yeah, it's like, and I think that's kind of like living a life of a Black woman, isn't it? I mean, it really is, because I feel like, you know, or a Black person, I feel like it's just that. There are times where you're just out just being a girl, living your vida loca, you know, and along comes somebody and, you know, all of a sudden you're a Black girl, you know. And so I think, or sometimes, you know, but sometimes for you, like, and for me too, that's how I feel. Like, I'm an artist, right? Sure, when visually I'm a Black woman artist, but I'm an artist. So sometimes I just want to be an artist. I just want to not think about that, not think about a heavy load. I just want to, and so the line, I think about the line, I think about drawing, and it becomes this thing that, you know, it's very, that frees me from all of that, you know, baggage, you know. So I'm living within this, so it's a contradiction in itself, isn't it? So yeah. Very therapeutic. Okay.
So what are you working on while you're here?
Right while I'm here, I'm working on a lot of things. My attitude included. No, while I'm here, I'm working on quite a few things. I'm pretty excited. I mean, I think the McColl Center is just amazing, and if you get a chance to apply, do it. While I've been here, I've been trying to find different way of working. And I think for me, like, even though you guys were very generous in allowing us to make the choice to be here in Charlotte versus being home, I really wanted to be here because I knew that the space would give me a different way of working or looking at the work. While I've been here, I've been developing a new body of work, and I'm always like, "Oh, take a picture." But one of the things I love the fact that it's my first time inviting somebody in my studio space and working with an assistant. I've never done that before, and I've been wanting to do that because I've been getting busier and busier in my practice and finding less and less time to do my work. So I'm wanting to figure out a way to make, you know, to make my practice sustainable by perhaps being able to, you know, offhand some of the things that is not necessary for me to be there doing. So it's been really lovely doing that. Yeah, and I've been experimenting. I mean, the McColl Center they've got everything. Wood shop, ceramic. I mean, it's a perfect place for me to bounce around. And so it's been like really difficult because there's just not enough time here. It'll be like 5 months. But you know, I'm able to, like, you know, spend a couple of days learn, and I've learned some new skills. I know Claudia set up a couple of workshops for us to learn the equipment here and stuff. So it's been pretty productive, I think. What do you think?
Yeah, and coming into your studio, I think you're there like a week. And there was like stuff. And I was like, how in the world did this even happen?
Yeah, I think I was at like grad school. I was like pretty crazy then too. Yeah, I think, you know, because I get so much anxiety, I think, and I think working in the studio really is a place for me to channel that. And I you know, the pandemic for a lot of people has been really terrible. It's been terrible for me too, globally per se, but on a personal level, like it has allowed me a chance to work uninterrupted. And yeah, I'm just like I'm just a really anxious person. When I get anxious, I just have to be thinking, even when I'm not even in there, thinking, oh, gee, maybe you can get on your computer and work on some file. You know, so it's always, I'm always working, I suppose. So I guess, it comes together in the end, you know?
But it's like part.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Well, it's interesting. I like that because you were going to explain to me how I work. And you're like, the other day, you were like, oh, I see how you work now. And then later on, I was thinking, what does she mean by that? I think I have to explain, because maybe I can understand. Maybe it's something I can understand, like how I work. Because, you know, you see a lot of artists, right?
Yeah, but I think one of the ways we work is like the way that a lot of artists work, right? Because you're building language, and you're always looking for kind of vocabulary to add. And so, like, there are these new things that you're like bringing in. And then looking at like building like the syntax of like how does it go together, and so it's interesting even when we talked about the ceramics that like you have used found kind of objects, right? Ceramics that are purchased, they're mass produced,
Right.
even though they're porcelain and fine, they're produced, they're sold, purchased, and then altered. But now you're like really into making your own.
Well, yeah, because I think that's, and again, that's kind of like I'm questioning, you know, because I did the sound object, and I was questioning, okay, maybe I should consider making, what is it, what, you know, how would that change the read of the work? So I go back and forth. I mean, certainly I got ideas for like handbuilding some things, but and I have some idea that I want to finish some stuff. So that, you know, that always, so in my video, it's stuff where I'm like, oh, I should probably consider hand building and stuff. I wonder how it would read. And so I will, so you'll come in my scene, you'll see me hand building and stuff, and it'll be there, and it's there like a few months, and I'm still thinking about it, but it's not really like finished work. It might be, depends. But yeah, so I'm always working, and I think the work that I showed you, I don't think I've shown it. I've shown it bits and pieces because I'm still not quite sure how I feel about it. I feel like it needs a little bit more, something more to make it like complete. But they're almost like sketches, you know, like sometimes some of the work is like sketches where, you know, I can't, in order to, like, I have an idea and I have to kind of go with it and to see if it works. And then I get interrupted because I'm, you know. But yeah, there's a few things that I'm hoping that I have plans for that's different levels of importance.
So we have a question. Thank you. To see people in this company because I can't. Oh, hey, Renuka. So this is a question from Renuka Maharaj, who is an artist. Do you see your art making in conversation with colonialism?
Absolutely, totally. Because I think that's the narrative I'm talking about. I'm talking about my own colonial history. You know, as I navigate life and I see things and I understand things or question things, and then yeah, and I feel like our entire world is based off colonial lineage. There's no way you can create work without you know, considering identity work without considering that lineage. Whether, you know, you're on an island or you're in the, you know, wherever you are in the Americas, I think it's about, it is. I mean, it's funny because the exhibition I'm doing right now with the ladies in Montreal, Cecile, she's from, I think, Saint Martin, which is one of the French colonies, I believe. And then there's Shayla Strauss, and she's also from another island, and I think there's also colonial history. So even though you know, I'm, you know, Jamaican, Canadian, whatever, we're all black. There's still this colonial history. Like I know Governor's Island. You know, reading the history about Governor's Island, and you know, that's got huge. I mean, the Dutch. I mean, it's all colonial.
But I think your choices too, right? So like the fact that the red
more pointed.
To choose,
Yeah.
Are so steeped in like white European.
And it's interesting. It's interesting that I came to those objects. I think the reason why I came to those objects is because there were these idealized versions of beauty, perfection, these things that this landscape that folks esteem to, you know. So I think that's how I came to those objects, like intuitively like that. And so then it becomes like, you know, a question of why, you know, why this?
And one of the things that you talk about, or language that I've seen